A hideous hello and welcome to the 2023 edition of Halloween Horror Stories from the Real Estate Guys. An acidic assortment of monstrous memoirs detailing deals gone bad that can provide compelling lessons for real estate investors. It's another eerie episode of Mayhem and Madness today on the Real Estate Guys radio program. If you've been listening to the Real Estate Guys for a while, then you've heard about the legendary Investor Summit. Simply put, it's the highest level event we do. And the content, faculty, and attendees are amazing. If you're serious about taking your real estate investing to the next level, consider joining us. You'll spend more than a week with like-minded investors, world-class educators, and real-world professionals, and you'll have a blast. It all takes place next summer, so to get the details before they're released to the general public, send an email to summit@realestateguysradio.com with the subject Summit 2024. We'll add you to the advance notice list, and you'll be invited to spend a fun-filled week learning and networking with more than 25 class sessions and breakouts, plus small format roundtable discussions, great dinner conversations, and a ton of fun. Send an email to summit@realestateguysradio.com with the subject Summit 2024 and be among the first to get the details to join the Real Estate Guys and an all-star faculty on the 22nd Annual Investor Summit. Welcome to the 2023 edition of Halloween Horror Stories. I'm your hideous host, Robert Helms, joined by our creepy co-host, Russell Gray.
Hey, Robert.
When challenges arise in real estate, you can glean very useful lessons if you'll pay attention, which is why every year around this time, we bring you Halloween Horror Stories. In fact, you may have read in the news about the woman who came back from her vacation to her home in Atlanta and discovered that a family home that they had owned for many years had been torn down by bulldozers. Come to find out, the demolition company went to the wrong place. That just happened last week, and we could call that a Halloween horror story, but the reason I bring it up is that's not what we're looking for. It's just something bad that happened to somebody. Here's the whole premise of a Halloween horror story. We're going to hear from investors today who have been through some yuckiness in real estate, and we want to know what happened, what did they do about it, including what alternatives they may have considered, and then the big part, what were the lessons learned?
I think the most important lessons in life are learned through hardship. And if you really think about the way your own biology works or your own physiology works, when you're stressed is when you get stronger. And so we learn by going through difficult times. We find out who we are, who our friends are, what we're capable of. We prune the tree, if you will, in terms of our attitudes, habits, beliefs, our finances, our team, whatever is going on. Economic cycles are the types of things where economies get a chance to clean things out. So I love that we do these Halloween horror stories. We've been doing them obviously forever. And it's such a great reality check. A lot of times when people look at investing, it's all hope and sunshine. And I quote Sam Zell all the time from Am I Being Too Subtle? But I just think it's such an important lesson. He says, look, the thing is, everybody can see the upside. Everybody sees the opportunity. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to go charging in, hoping you're going to get rich. But can you really see the risk and navigate the risk? Well, how do you know where the risk is? By talking to people that ran into it like a brick wall. And what did they learn? They paid full price for the lesson. You get to get it for a discount. That's why we record these interviews. So grab a notepad and get ready to go to school.
Sometimes what happened was out of the investor's control. There's still lots of lessons to learn, but many times it's through a misstep or a mistake. This year, some brave investors will let us behind the curtain to see their tumbles and tragedies so that we can all benefit and learn. We'll start this year's shocking short stories with a cauldron of circumstance we call The Steady Hand. This construction conundrum comes from our good friend and Amazon bestselling author, Jay Johnson. Hey, Jay, how are you?
Doing good, Robert. How are you?
I am good. Other than the current topic, which is the misery of Halloween horror stories, you're in the construction business, and I know you've had a few things not go exactly correctly, but tell us your Halloween horror story.
Yeah, Robert, in 2018, in the fall, of course, we're in Wyoming, so winter's a big deal here. And in the fall, we started a project kind of at the upper end of the market. At the time, we were coming kind of out of the tail end of a soft market in our area. And we chose to build the upper end of the market to isolate ourselves from volume builders. But in doing that, we also isolate ourselves from volume of buyers. So it puts us in a tighter demographic. There's a lot less transactions that happen at those price points. And we knew that, but we decided to move forward with that niche. We started construction 2018. By about early summer, late spring 2019, we had finished the project. On July 1st, I was ATV riding in South Dakota. All of a sudden, my phone came into service. We didn't have the house sold yet. And I started getting all these messages that 600 workers were literally locked out of a coal mine, out of work with no advance notice. They showed up to work and there was a lock on the gate.
Wow.
And in this area, it's heavily, heavily dependent on energy. Some of the largest coal mines in the world are right here. And that the folks in the coal mines or the vendors that support them are directly relative to the demographic we were trying to market to. So it was an immediate problem for us that we saw there.
Wow. So you've got this market that's made up of these folks who have good paying jobs, and all of a sudden 600 of those jobs are gone. And this is a spec house, right? You guys are building the house in anticipation of having somebody like an executive from a company like this come in and buy the house?
Yeah, that's correct. And generally we don't do that on the speculation side in customs, but we needed to update some marketing material, and more importantly, we were trying to advance a long-term land interest to where if we took a number of lots, we would essentially get one for free at the end to represent a discount over all the previous lots. So we had incentive to keep building in this very neighborhood.
So what happened? You've got the house finished. And of course, as a builder, you don't want too many days between the day the house is done and the day somebody closes escrow on it. What happened?
Yeah, as you know, the most expensive time to carry that project's when it's done. And the construction interest is highest then.
Right.
And so we were experiencing that. And generally, we had about 90 days marketing time built into the budget, and the offers stopped, the looks stopped, and so forth. Well, what ultimately happened is we migrated towards fall. We tried staging the house, doing a number of things, and we always knew we had an exit strategy. I was in a position in my life where if I had to, I could just pull the ripcord, drop all of our profits out of it, all of our carried interest, and sell it at a fire sale. We were confident that it would sell. That was kind of our exit plan, building on the tail end of a soft market anyway.
Well, that's a good point that you bring up, which is you need more than one exit strategy. And plan A was we'll build this fabulous house. Someone will come along and buy it when we're almost complete and make the transition. But knowing you had that kind of plan B in your pocket helps you sleep at night, but nobody wants to spend a year doing a project and make no profit.
Correct. And the other issue we were facing was we were building in this very specific neighborhood, again, for the land interest. And we knew if we dropped the price and let something trade at that low of a price, it would kill forward appraisals. And that could really jeopardize the land interest we'd been working on for 3 or 4 years up to that point.
Well, because you guys were essentially becoming your own comps.
Exactly. That was exactly the problem. And so we had to kind of balance. Do we pull the ripcord early, which was some of the advice we were getting of let's just get out while we can? But the steady hand in me kept saying, well, maybe we need to kind of think this through so we don't hurt ourselves for the next 2 years going forward and abandon 4 years of historical work. So that kind of is what presented the main issue.
So tell us what happened. What did you do about it? And how did the story end up?
Basically, we had buyer A under contract to buy our house by that time at a slight discount, about a $15,000 discount.
Okay.
Well, the deal was contingent on their house selling to buyer B. Then we find out buyer B, the whole thing's contingent on their house selling. So essentially that's where we were stuck. Is we got into about October, we started to learn buyer A's wife wasn't going to put up with it through the holidays, and the deal would back out and we would be stuck with this thing through the winter. That's obviously the slowest time to move product. So again, that steady hand, I finally just realized kind of what you talk about all the time. You got to have a good team. You know, there's the book, Who, Not How.
Yeah.
I was spending a lot of time figuring out how we're going to do this. And I finally just reached out to a buddy of mine. He was actually on our realtor team. And I just asked him, what would you do? And at the time, he said, well, I'm not sure. Let me think on it. The very next morning, I had a phone call from him with the plan we immediately implemented. He said, well, here's what we'll do. Let's buy buyer B's house, force the transactions down the line. And that house had a terrible kitchen. It had a lot of showings. It was in the mid price point. So there was a lot of buyers that would be the appropriate demographic for that product, but it just wouldn't move. And it's because the homeowner, we could all see she was in love with that kitchen, nasty wallpaper, terrible paint, just a few cosmetic things. We knew we could go in and fix that.
Yeah.
Even if we were wrong, my buddy said, well, we'll cut our carry costs by less than half. We'll restart the clock on the loan docs. And because there's kind of some, as you know, some lending rules behind that. if we have to carry through the winter, our position is far less than half.
Yeah.
So that's what we did. We immediately moved to buy House B, forced the closures. And when we went to the bank about it, they just thought it was the best thing they'd ever heard. I mean, they were so pleased that it was an everybody wins situation that they decided to repaper all the documents, shift all the loan documents to property B, no origination fees, no cost. They were just ecstatic. In fact, to this day, when I see that loan officer out in the community or chamber meetups or anything like that, he'll always talk about that was a business person's, not a tradesperson's approach to a problem. The lesson I took from that is what you talk about all the time. The team is more valuable than the property or the specific project. And had I not had that team, had I built a history of always shopping the cheapest person, trying to undercut by 10 cents, it wouldn't have worked out very well for us. But this realtor friend of ours, he ultimately ended up waiving all of his transaction fees, his half of the fees to sell the spec house, acquire House B, and dispose of House B. So we ended up with a very, very marginal reduction in what our intended profit was out of the whole project. It just drug on forever.
Well, there's so many great points in this, and it was a very creative solution. You guys are in the business of making houses look better, and who's better positioned to take up a fixer-upper and make it beautiful, but you wouldn't necessarily have thought about that. So the third-party perspective, right, having a great team member who isn't as close to the problem as you, steps back and says, wait a minute, what if we did this? And, of course, the other win is you've got the bank who's carrying the financing on the first property. They're as exposed as you are, maybe not directly, but they're certainly fretting about it. All of a sudden you come in with a way to reduce that and provide what is probably a faster path to a sale once you get House B. And it also is a win for the folks who were buying the house from you. So great story. Some other great lessons in here, Jay. Obviously the teamwork lesson is a great one, but also just thinking about how you approach a problem and that steady hand you refer to. It's easy to get caught up in, oh gosh, nothing's selling and this thing is languishing on the market and we'll just cut our price because you have that plan B. But sometimes cooler heads prevail.
Absolutely. And that's something that in my prior experience I've learned is that I got a long experience in law enforcement and as a SWAT operator. And I've learned that generally a steady hand is the answer to everything. Don't just start playing whack-a-mole. And you got to kind of tune out the noise, has been my experience, and listen to advisors, but not let them tell you what to do. You know, that's ultimately our own decision. So that's what I've learned over the years, and it's certainly helped here by having a good team around me and being able to kind of sift through the noise, most of which was saying, bail out now.
Well, it was the makings of a Halloween horror story, but it actually turned out okay, and we appreciate you sharing and the great lessons. Thanks, Jay.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Robert. I appreciate it. Take care.
There's Jay Johnson from Code 3 Assets. It's Halloween horror stories, things that went terribly, desperately wrong, and the lessons we can learn. Today on the Real Estate Guys radio program.
Having trouble finding deals where the numbers make sense? Invest in an asset class that delivers cash flow to you in good times and bad, and where most of that cash flow is tax-free. I'm Dave Zook. Many of you have heard me speak at Real Estate Guys events or heard me on their podcast. My team is a top 5 ATM operator in the country, and right now accredited investors can make cash flow returns well into the double digits and get huge tax deductions. For your free report on this lucrative asset class, email atm@realestateguysradio.com.
Are you achieving everything you want in life? What if there was a time-tested way for you to get everything you've ever dreamed of? The most successful people in life set goals and keep themselves accountable. But how? The good news is that it's not rocket science. You too can learn the skills and unleash the motivation that will create success in your life. Hi, this is Robert Helms, and I'd like to personally invite you to attend Create Your Future, the 2024 Goals Retreat, January 12th to 14th in Dallas, Texas. This unique weekend event has been called phenomenal, inspirational, and life-changing by the thousands of people that have attended. Hear from some of them and find out more at goalsretreat.com. Get your life back on track, physically, spiritually, and financially. Attend the 2024 Goals Retreat on the second weekend of the new year. Visit goalsretreat.com to learn more and get on the advance notice list. This is no dress rehearsal. Live the life you were meant to. Visit goalsretreat.com or call 888-489-7723, extension 18. That's goalsretreat.com. Welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program, heard every weekend on this rancid radio station and at your favorite putrid podcast platforms. It's the 2023 edition of Halloween Horror Stories, and the next atrocious incident is an embroiled emergency we call Eviction and Expulsion. This watery washout comes from an awesome young syndicator you've heard on the show before. Welcome back to the Real Estate Guys, Mr. Robbie Butler. Hey, Robbie.
Hey, Robert. Great to see you.
Well, great to have you today, except for the fact that it's Halloween Horror Stories, which means something must have gone wrong. What was it?
So looking back on this, I can smile, but this was not a fun apartment experience for us. In one of our early acquisitions in my local market, we had a tenant that while we were purchasing the property, we had already discovered was a problem. So the previous owner began the eviction process. Straightforward. We said, great, we get to buy it and put a tenant in that we're a little bit more fond of. The eviction process dragged out and made our purchase, and the tenant was still there. I was thinking, okay, we can finish the eviction. That should be no big deal. Well, it turned winter. And that tenant began to not pay, first, of course, rent, but then gas bills and electricity bills. And it got very, very cold in our local market. So in my head, I thought, well, I want to get this tenant out. I'm not going to pay that gas bill. No chance I'm going to heat that apartment and make it more comfortable for him and his wife while they're trying to move out of this apartment, and they're taking advantage and they're doing damage. I'm not going to make this better for them. I'm not going to pay the gas bill. It's worth mentioning here that I think that apartment was 700 square feet. So the gas bill per month, maybe $40. And yet there I was saying, no chance I'm going to pay that gas bill.
Well, before you go on, this is an important point, and you'd have to check with tenant landlord law in the various states and places that you might own property. But if they were responsible for it and they quit paying, as a landlord, you'd have the right to turn it on. But yeah, why would you? They're leaving. You need them to leave. So just quit paying the bill, right?
Right. Except for once they were evicted, we said, great, well, now let's fire that gas bill up and get this apartment renovated and going. I mentioned there was already some damage, but as you'll hear, it was not that easy. We turned the gas bill on. I was there. I was actually a floor down, and the apartment warms up 10 degrees, then 20 degrees, and suddenly we hear a hissing, which turns into a tidal wave of water across multiple floors, multiple areas of separate apartments. We had busted at least 4 pipes in the walls of that apartment due to the freeze out.
Oh, man.
How we missed this, I have no idea. The strategic thinking was out to lunch for the entire time this was going on. And yet now suddenly we are, running around the apartment looking for the shutoffs and slamming gates and figuring out how to get this water to stop coming down into active apartments, into this apartment, multiple walls. Such a mess.
Wow. So obviously, in hindsight, you think through this differently. What did you do after this happened? Tell us what happened.
We, at this stage of our growth, all we knew to do was DIY. We got a group of friends, got in there with power tools and started cutting apart apartment walls. We destroyed a bathroom. We destroyed the kitchen upstairs of this apartment. We began hacking into walls looking for the plumbing. We had pretty centralized plumbing, and yet we could not find it. So our path of destruction grew bigger and broader, and now we had a bathroom down, then we had another kitchen down, then we had an upstairs down. We finally found the problem in between floors. And I mentioned there was multiple pipe problems, but it was all basically centralized around one area in between floors. It took my business partner probably 10 hours specifically to solve just the broken pipes, not including all the demolition, multiple people there. We've estimated probably all in man hours, 120 man hours to fix 4 pipes in between floors. A nightmare.
So I'm guessing that was more costly than paying the bill for the tenant. Oh, man. So it's easy to laugh after the fact. I can imagine at the time, right? Then you've just got all the issues around that. What were the big lessons here, Robbie? What did you guys learn from this?
The short and sweet lesson first was buy more solder. We went through so much soldering those pipes back together. I remember when we ran out and had to make another trip to the store. That, of course, is a joke. The lessons are larger and deeper. The first one is obviously an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yeah.
The solution was sitting there in a bill from the gas company, and I could have just paid it. It was probably harder to choose not to pay it than it would have been to just pay it. And yet, obviously, we made the wrong choice there. So limited thinking about where I was going to save my $40 was an easy lesson.
Yep.
There's another lesson that I'll share with our listeners here that in reflection did mean a lot to me. The legal process was going to happen. There was a defined process. Even if you don't agree with it, we were already in process. We'd done everything correctly, filed with the courts, etc. And so I could have trusted that process. It was in place. That same tenant, I believe the night before the police would show up and remove the tenant, lock the doors, etc., I was actually on site for a separate furnace repair. That same tenant actually loaned me a lighter. Well, that level of again, you can tell I was on site frequently at these stages of my career. That level of generosity, I might have thought about that when I was deciding not to pay his gas bill. He was already going to be evicted. There was no stopping that. Here was me saying, I'm not going to make it comfortable for him. What an ignorant approach when he was willing to loan me a lighter to fix a furnace that was not up and running when he was being removed from the apartment. So the generosity that I could have brought would have saved us 120 man hours, when in reality, I wasn't improving anything by trying to keep his apartment cold. The view that I had to bring value to someone else could have applied here too, to make it a far easier experience for so many people involved.
Well, love your candor on that. You know, we make the best decisions at the time that we know how to make, but it's hindsight that lets us go back and reverse engineer and say, man, if I'd only thought that through. So hopefully this Halloween horror story will help other folks to think through some of those potential issues and remember that generosity can go a long way. Well, the good news is your career has taken a much better path since then, but these are the things that we remember, right? So I really appreciate you sharing the story and your candid lessons, Robbie.
Stay warm out there.
There's Robbie Butler. Next, we'll look at the worrisome world of ludicrous lending with a frightful fable we title The Deceptive Disappearing Loan. This financing fiasco comes from an awesome gentleman that helps finance all kinds of properties. Welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program, Anton Matley. Hey, Anton.
Hey, Robert. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. Most fundings go well, but every now and then there's a problem. Tell us your Halloween horror story.
Yes, definitely. Right. In the past, we have talked about our own investments. Now, this one is about financing horror stories, and there are certainly plenty of them around, even during good times. When interest rates start moving up in a really fast fashion, then these horror stories mushroom. And this actually goes back just about a year ago. It was really the horror story of Halloween 2022.
Okay.
As everyone remembers, right? We had record low interest rates. We had the Fed rate that was virtually at zero at the quarter point as the target rate. And then they started raising the rate in March of 2022. And in the multifamily world and commercial finance world, a lot of deals have been done with bridge loans in 2021 and 2022. And we also had a deal that was originally targeted for a bridge loan. And bridge lenders were really aggressive. But once interest rates started to increase, including the Fed rate, which has an impact on the SOFR, which is the index rate typically for bridge loans, that increased. And as a result, a lot of bridge lenders were dialing back their leverage. They increased their credit spread on the loans. So it didn't look that attractive any longer. And as a result, a lot of regional banks actually started stepping in and take some market share from the traditional bridge lenders, which a lot of them were debt funds that were covering that space. These regional banks were absolutely great because some of them even offered fixed rate loans, which they quickly realized that's not a smart idea. So they also moved over to floating rate loans. But even with floating rate loans, the spread that they were offering were well below of what the debt funds were offering. So last year, we had one larger deal for roughly a $40 million loan for one of our clients. And we decided, let's try, instead of a debt fund, go with a regional bank lender. That client actually had already a past relationship with that bank. So we figured that's a pretty solid path forward. And so we applied for that loan. Everything looked fine. Then, as you know, we had in August, right afterwards, then Fed started raising the rates again. That was during the period when they raised by 0.75% every single time. And so then that was in August. Then we went into September, they raised it another 0.75, and then in October, raising it again. And that created a lot of stress in the banking system, right? So everyone talked about SVB earlier this year, but actually last year, during those interest rate increases, a lot of banks were dialing back. And most banks, particularly when it comes to loans that are 30, 40 million, $50 million loan amounts, whether it's construction or bridge loans, they so-called have participation by other banks in these deals. And we knew that from the beginning, and we talked to the bank, look, we know that you are participating that loan, roughly half of the 40 million they had to participate. They told us, no worries, we have our participants lined up. And actually, there was another rate increase, and these participants then decided no longer to participate. So we were just a couple of weeks before the closing, and the bank said, sorry, guys, we would love to do it, but we cannot go above what we have committed of 20 million. The participating banks pulled out. We can't find anyone. We looked under every rock. There is just no way we can do it. So that bank had to move out in October at the last moment.
So you have your client and they're in escrow and they're doing their due diligence and they have this assurance from the bank that the loan's going to happen. And all of a sudden, the bank cannot find anyone else to participate. This is actually pretty common in larger loans. One bank doesn't want to take all the risk, so they go out to other banks and they'll all take a piece of it. But that can be transparent to the borrower as well. In this case, they're in the 11th hour and now there's no loan. So what did you guys do?
Yes. So we talk to the bank on a regular basis, and we do that to all lenders, even if it's an agency lender, a Fannie or Freddie, a bank, whether it's a bridge lender. We always try to have a pulse on where they stand with the underwriting, or any clouds that are potentially showing up on the horizon. So we talk to the bank on a weekly basis about that participation piece. We talk to other banks to see where they stand with similar type of bridge loans. And we just got a sense that the market only has been tightening since we applied for that loan. And as a result, we continue to keep the door open with a number of debt fund bridge lenders with whom we obviously also discussed that deal initially and already received quotes from. So we essentially put them on in the drawer and told them, look, right now we went with the bank, but we continuously still kept in contact with some of these bridge lenders just in case that would happen. We didn't think really that it would happen after all the assurances from the bank, but that ultimately what happened. So as soon as we got the bad news, we then immediately shifted over to to a couple of the bridge lenders, and one of them was willing to step in, and we were actually able to close within a couple of weeks after we got that horror story that was announced to us from the bank. The terms were not as great as with the bank, as it was originally quoted, but we originally underwrote already to the higher spread based on a debt fund. So from a client perspective, obviously it's always painful to not get the best terms, but at least we were able to close.
Well, and no investor left behind. We saw a lot of bridge lending happening in this period of time, and a bridge loan is different than most permanent financing in that it's normally shorter term and has potentially higher variable interest rates. Why is it that bridge lenders were able to come to the rescue?
Because they have access either to their own balance sheet, and at that point there was still a lot of liquidity in the market. So you have a lot of equity funds that wanted to expand into the bridge loan space. And at the same time, you also have an active securitization market, meaning that various bridge loans are bundled together as bonds and then sold to investors in the marketplace. So you have that ability as a bridge lender, even if you do not keep it on your own balance sheet, you're able to bundle those and then sell them and free up your balance sheet for new loans. And so that's why bridge loan activity has been, even today, has been still pretty strong.
Well, you bring up a great point, Anton, and it's one of the lessons of this case study, and that is, well, there's two that I see, and you can fill us in on the other ones. Very smart to keep the other alternative lender or lenders in the know. It's no surprise that a lender recognizes a borrower might be looking elsewhere. But rather than just say, no, forget it, we've moved on, you say, hey, we've chosen the regional bank for these reasons, but we'll keep you up to speed in case something happens. And in this case, it did. But the other thing you mentioned was underwriting to the higher spread, meaning a lot of the folks that got in trouble with bridge loans in the last year just took a loan at a higher price because they could get the deal, and they weren't underwriting to those higher rates. But you specifically mentioned that you had already underwritten to the higher rate. Sure, the borrower would love to get the lower rate and the better terms, but the deal still worked at the bridge loan rates.
Yes, it's a very important point, right? So at that, for that loan, we actually underwrote to a spread of around 3.5% over SOFR, and the bank came in well below that. It was in the mid 2% range, so almost a 1% difference in spread. So we underwrote to the 3.5%, and so we were able to switch over to the higher rate without having an issue with capital raise as well as returns that were projected for the investors.
That is a great lesson. Hey, any other lessons that came up as a result of what happened here?
Yes, it's really important that you are just on top of your capital stack, that you really understand what you need and what shifts could potentially happen within your capital stack, whether it's your senior debt, whether it's your pref equity, if you bring in a pref equity, as well as your own common equity that you're rising, because it can shift very quickly, right? And as we know, in an environment where you now only can earn as an investor 5% by just parking your money in short-term treasuries or in savings account and CDs, you need to be able to convince your investors that your investment in real estate is still a good investment. So you need to recognize that it might not be that easy to fill your capital stack as you thought it would be just 3 months ago. So always be flexible, add more cushion to whatever piece of the capital stack you think you need so that you have enough flexibility to still get your deal done.
Great points. Well, you can imagine the struggle that the client has when they're told in the final hour there is no loan. But this is why you want to work with a competent loan professional. They'll keep a cool head and they'll get you to where you need to be. Hey, if you've never invested in multifamily and you're interested in it, Anton's got a great report he's written called The Ultimate Guide to Financing Your Apartment Complex. You can get a copy of that for free by sending an email to multifamily@realestateguysradio.com. Anton, as always, thanks for your contribution to the show, and happy Halloween.
Yeah, same to you. Thanks for having me on.
You're tuned to the Real Estate Guys radio program. It's Halloween Horror Stories. We'll have more next. As I speak, inflation is robbing you at a rate north of 10%. Last year, the number one zip code that Mid-South homebuyers offered income property to Real Estate Guys listeners in appreciated by 21%. To harness that spread and protect and grow your wealth in the current economic storm, you need the 2 decades of experience in renovation and management that Mid-South homebuyers brings to their investors. Every home Mid-South offers you will have brand new components, a new 30-year roof, and a high-quality renter, all in a price range under $150,000. Their empathetic property managers will use your ROI as their North Star, while the lack of repairs on their totally renovated properties contributes to their almost 4-year average renter stay and 99% occupancy rate. Learn about their lifetime occupancy guarantee and total 1-year maintenance guarantee by emailing midsouth@realestateguysradio.com. That's midsouth@realestateguysradio.com. You'll be glad you did. The Real Estate Guys are throwing a party and you're invited. Join us at the New Orleans Investment Conference, November 1st through 4th. Now in its 49th year, it's the world's longest-running investment conference and features some of the biggest names in economics and investing, including James Rickards, George Gammon, Danielle DiMartino Booth, Rick Rule, and Peter Schiff. The Real Estate Guys are speaking in multiple sessions, attending lots of others, and we're hosting an invitation-only party one of the evenings for our friends and listeners, including some VIPs for you to mingle with. So make your plans to join the Real Estate Guys at the New Orleans Investment Conference. With all that's going on in the world, no serious investor can afford to miss it. Send an email to neworleans@realestateguysradio.com and we'll get you all the details. That's neworleans@realestateguysradio.com. And we'll see you there. Welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio show and our annual edition of Halloween Horror Stories. If you'd like to prevent a frightening future, then start off 2024 with a beautiful bang at Create Your Future. The 2024 Goals Retreat happens the second weekend of the new year in Dallas, Texas. Get the most out of life and set yourself on a powerful path for achievement. Get the details and reserve your spot at goalsretreat.com. That's goalsretreat.com. It's Halloween Horror Stories today on the Real Estate Guys. And before we get on with the obnoxious oratory, it's time to play Real Estate Trivia, your chance to win a prize by knowing today's real estate trivia question. In a minute, I'll ask you a question that has something to do with real estate as soon as you think you know the answer. Send us an email to trivia@realestateguysradio.com. Trivia@realestateguysradio.com. Give us your name, the answer to the question, and your physical mailing address. Because if you're the first to win, you're going to get a really scary book called The Creature from Jekyll Island by our friend G. Edward Griffin. It's all about the Federal Reserve. Ah, how horrifying. That can be yours if you know today's real estate trivia question. Last week on the show, it was Ask the Guys, and we asked you this: which country has the largest average home size? Well, the answer is Australia. Australians have the largest homes in the world. The average Australian home is around 2,500 square feet. American homes, which are the second largest in the world, average closer to 1,900 square feet. By the way, Hong Kong has the smallest homes in the world. On the island of Hong Kong, homes average a cozy 345 square feet. Here's our Halloween edition of Real Estate Trivia. Name the most popular Halloween costume for 2023. Yeah, every year it's something different. This year, what's the most popular Halloween costume? And I know you're thinking, well, how is that a real estate trivia question? Well, let me explain. When the kids dress up in costumes, where do they go? They walk around the neighborhood. around the real estate. They knock on the doors of properties. So what is the most popular Halloween costume this year? If you know or just want to guess, send your best guess to trivia@realestateguysradio.com. Trivia@realestateguysradio.com. Give us your name, your answer, and your address. The first person that gets it right gets Ed Griffin's awesome book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. That's today's real estate trivia question. It's the 2023 edition of Halloween Horror Stories, epic real estate failures, and the important lessons we can learn. The next meddlesome madcap is an informing impasse we know as the Rogue Restitution. This litigious lunacy comes from real estate investor and syndicator Tyler Edwards. Hey, Tyler.
Hey, Robert, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Well, it hasn't always been that way, obviously, because you're appearing on Halloween Horror Stories. You have kind of a unique story. Tell us what happened.
So, back in 2019, I own a general construction company, and we were building a couple houses for people. It just so happened, after 16 years, we finally ended up in some litigation. And after they say it's not if, it's when.
Yep.
But we were basically doing a full remodel in addition to a one person's house. That was our first client. And then we were building a brand new house for another client all at the same time.
Yep.
We get going through it, and we're about 75% done with the first project. And the client comes to us and says that they're out of money and they need to let us go, which we were okay with that. We understand, it happens, money runs out, and it's pretty common in the construction world.
Yep.
So anyways, after that was done, we went ahead and sent them the last invoice for about, I think like $36,000. And they refused to pay, said they didn't have the money, blah, blah, blah. So I had to seek legal counsel and figure out where we go from here to try to collect our last invoice.
Yep.
We live in the great state of California, so there's a lot of nuances there to deal with. So the attorney says, well, we need to file a mechanics lien, and in California, we had 90 days to do so. We tried to negotiate with the client for up to almost all the way to the 90 days. And then finally, our hands were tied. So we went ahead and filed the lien.
And just so no investor left behind, when a contractor does work on a property and they're unpaid or just anticipate they might be, they can file what's known as a mechanics lien, which just gives the world fair warning that there could be an issue.
That's right. Well, so we kind of just felt that we would just leave the lien out there, and someday they would want to refinance the house or they'd sell. And at that point they would have to, pay us.
Yep.
Well, through the process of learning how litigation works and how all the laws that we have to deal with as business owners, we realized that in California, we had another 90 days to actually file suit to foreclose on their home. So this is where it starts to get expensive. You have to hire attorneys and you start going through the process of foreclosure. Well, in my case, the opposite party, the opposing party, they actually ended up hiring a pretty bulldogish attorney, and they fought back. What happened for us was after they did all our depositions through not only myself, my family, and my friends, and they just really dug in pretty deep to where at the end of it, they knew more about me than I knew about myself. And through discovery, they were able to get all of our corporate documentation, our QuickBooks files. They know everything. So they found a loophole in California law that says if you don't have workers' comp on even one employee, that your contractor's license is suspended by law, is what they call it. Not that we ever got any suspensions really from the CSLB or the contractors board, but they have this case law they found that is supposed to be suspended by law, which means we're not allowed to collect any kind of compensation for the work that we performed.
Wow.
And the way that they were able to do that, even though we had workers' comp on all of our employees, we had one of our partners that we brought on in early 2018. I never named him as a corporate officer. And so when they got a hold of our corporate books, they were able to convince the courts that he was an employee and not an actual partner. And that's where they found the loophole to nail us. And I told you earlier how they were able to acquire our QuickBooks records. Well, they went ahead and they started soliciting other clients. Well, it just so happened the second client that I was telling you about, the new house, they lived right down the street from the first client, and they were solicited, and they went ahead and they bought into it. So long story short, the court systems ruled in their favor, and we've found out that we have a better return policy than Costco. at least Costco, you have to return the merchandise. These people got free houses out of it. And it was definitely a big lesson, especially for a small business. It was a tough hit. But the scariest thing for us was that they were trying to pierce what they call the corporate veil.
Yeah.
And they were trying to come after my family and I personally for all of our personal assets to try to collect. That's where it really got very stressful and scary there for a while, because for 3 years we've been fighting this, and it's that we don't know how to move forward. As real estate investors, we want to continue to acquire assets, and then at the same time, we're being threatened that somebody could take them from us. So what do we do? And it was just a time that it was a lot of reflecting and really challenging. And luckily, even though our corporate docs weren't completely up to snuff, we were able to survive the corporate piercing. So now our corporation still owes the debt, but we don't. So a big lesson, definitely a big lesson on dotting I's and crossing T's and making sure you have a good counsel. I would say even before you ever get in any kind of litigation, I think a person should have someone on your team that you're always running things by and keeping you in compliance, because we had no idea. Even our attorney had no idea about this case law that came about that they found. So that's kind of the story in a nutshell, I guess.
So it sounds like you had completed one of the jobs and it was satisfactory. They only learned about this through the attorney's outreach. And the other one, they'd quit paying and you'd agreed to stop doing the work. And in both cases, they were able to get all their money back.
Yeah, upwards of 7 figures.
Wow. Well, let's talk about the asset protection side for a minute, because the charging order protection afforded by an LLC or any corporate protection is reliant on having followed all the corporate formalities. So this idea of piercing the corporate veil is if they can allege and prove that you weren't following corporate formalities, but in fact you were. So at least that protection stayed in place. And that's a great lesson for anyone listening who maybe hasn't crossed those I's and dotted those T's to say, let's just check. Let's just go and make sure we do a quick audit, a legal audit, that everything is how it's supposed to be. How would you know something like the partner not being named? I mean, that's an easy thing to slip through the cracks. And for something like that, it could be that an errors and omissions policy or some kind of other insurance policy might be able to aid. But that's just one of those situations that you don't know until you find out.
Yeah, very much so. When for us, we incorporated in 2007, threw the folder in the cabinet, and there it sat. And total lesson for us that, hey, there's certain things you have to do yearly with meetings and all. There's a lot to it that they don't teach us that in school. So it's like the school of hard knocks is how I seem to learn.
Now, Tyler, how has this made you a better contractor and or a better investor?
Well, it's definitely made me a better business owner, contractor, investor, by knowing that I need to employ the right people, the right teammates, people that know more than I do in different arenas, like the legal side of things. I think as entrepreneurs, we have a great idea and we just get out there and we hit it hard. And we want to pursue our idea, but there's so many nuances to it and so many facets to what we're doing that it may get overlooked. And if you don't have that right, professional in place, that thing that got overlooked could really bite you in the butt. I mean, for us, it was 16 years later.
Wow. Well, we appreciate you sharing the story. Hopefully folks can learn and avoid a similar circumstance. Thanks for being on Halloween Horror Stories this year.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
There's Tyler Edwards. Things don't always go right, but hopefully we'll get some lessons that'll make us better investors moving forward. You're tuned to the Real Estate Guys radio program. It's Halloween Horror Stories today.
Real Estate Guys listeners, are you tired of losing real estate deals due to financing issues? Have you had enough of waiting on banks, lenders, and investor groups to fund new projects? What if there were a way to eliminate all the hassle and invest in real estate on your own terms? I'm here to tell you there is. Patrick Donahoe here from Paradigm Life. I'm an Investopedia Top 100 Most Influential Financial Advisor, and I recently wrote a best-selling book about the financial strategy that changed my entire investment model, and the one that could change yours. To get a copy of my book for free and learn how you can maximize your real estate portfolio by acting as your own bank, send an email to mybank@realestateguysradio.com. Don't make another real estate deal without reading my book first. Email mybank@realestateguysradio.com now to get your copy for free.
Welcome back to our annual edition of Halloween Horror Stories on the Real Estate Guys radio show and podcast. To really get in the spirit, come join the Real Estate Guys in the most haunted city in America as we travel to the 49th annual New Orleans Investment Conference. This is an amazing conference on resources, real assets, and real estate. Speakers like Lynn Alden, George Gammon, Danielle DiMartino Booth, Peter Schiff, James Rickards, and the Real Estate Guys. To get all the details and be invited to our annual Friday night listener party, just send an email to neworleans@realestateguysradio.com. neworleans@realestateguysradio.com. We'll wrap up this year's Halloween Horror Stories with a terminal tale, hereafter known as Shots in the Night. This deadly drama comes to us from an awesome investor and syndicator, and the gentleman that holds the distinction of being on Halloween Horror Stories more than any other listener. Let's welcome back Mr. Sep McCom. Hey, Sep.
Hey, Robert. Great to be with you again.
Well, it's good to have you with us. I want to talk about something right at the beginning here, which is, people hear, well, Sep's been on a lot more episodes of Halloween Horror Stories. Is he just got bad luck? And I think the more that you learn as you are an investor, that makes you a better investor. And the question is, do you learn from the things that go wrong? And I just noticed you have done a great job of always getting the lesson. And this year we've got a really ugly Halloween horror story. Sep, tell us what happened.
Yeah, so this is a house. I've actually been inside this house. We bought it back in 2016. We had a tenant in there for a long time. And a couple months back, we tried refinancing it essentially. So tried refinancing it. The appraiser said, hey, you guys need to make some foundation repairs. So we got our foundation guy to go out there and make the repairs. And it wasn't just something he could do in a couple hours. So it was going to take a couple days. The house has a basement and there's a finished room down there. So he had to add carbon fiber straps and seal it and all that stuff. So This house, there was a single mom living there and she had two kids. So she had a teenage son and a daughter. And when the mom was out working, the son would look over the daughter and babysit during the day, but there was no father. And they were good tenants. They always paid rent on time. And what happened when my foundation guy was there is he started to befriend the teenager. The foundation guy, he's got kids, and he's like, he just got to know more about this kid. And he would tell me, he's like, this is a good kid. He mows the neighbors' lawns, and he's looking after his sister while his mom's working. Well, one of the days when the foundation guy pulls up to the house, he sees the kid come from up the street, and he was coming back from a crowd of kids. And he asked him, everything okay? Because he looked like he was just kind of, his feathers were ruffled a little bit. And the teenager said, yeah, I went and got in a fight with a kid that stole my bike. So he thought that it was a particular individual who had stolen it, and he got in a fist fight with him. So foundation guy was telling him it's not worth it. He gave him some cash. He was like, just go buy a new bike. These types of things are petty. And the kid is, he's being a teenager. So his ego got the best of him. The foundation guy keeps doing the work, goes home. And then later that night, the teenager is in the basement bedroom with his friend, and they're playing video games. So then the teenager gets a text message from a girl that he liked, and the girl's like, hey, I'm going to come over. Can you unlock the front door? I'll be there in like 10, 15 minutes. So he leaves the basement. Mom's not home. Sister's not home. It's just the teenager and his friend. He goes unlock the door. He goes back downstairs and plays video games. Well, a couple minutes later, a group of guys comes in through the house, and they go down to the basement, and it's a gang. So they pull out a gun. They point it at the teenager, and they kill him, and they shoot the friend. The friend was able to survive. He was able to escape, and he ran to the neighbor's house, a couple of houses down, called the police. So it was tragic when that happened. Understandably, the mom was devastated. So I found out about it the next day. property manager had called me. They were understandably upset and sad. And the foundation guy, he was taking it really hard because he liked the teenager, and he was, the closest thing to a fatherly figure that week, trying to do the best that he could to help. But he's like, he needed some time off, basically. So yeah, a lot of trauma that happened that week because of this. So the difference, this was the 10th shooting incident that I've had in 13 years of investing. And the difference between this one and the first one is the team that was in place was able to handle it. So they immediately called the tenant. They, offered the condolences, like, whatever you need us to do, let us know. They helped to relocate just because they didn't know if it was going to be isolated or if it was going to be something that, could potentially cause harm to the mom or the daughter. And obviously the foundation guy, we had to give him some time off, but they were able to handle it. They got the hazardous materials team to go on site to take care of it. They got the contractor to go back to do the make ready and all that. This is the type of thing that when it happens, most investors will just blame the neighborhood. They'll say, I'm never going to invest in this community anymore. I'm done with real estate investing, or the neighborhood is cursed. But this isn't one of the worst neighborhoods that we have. This is not a D neighborhood. This is like a C+, B-. There's a lot of homeowners in this area. Granted, it's still affordable, but it's not where you would expect it to happen.
Wow. Well, just a devastating story. And obviously, there's no way to soften the blow of what happened, especially to that family. But I think you do bring up a great point. And it's a point that we've been talking about. When things go wrong, we did a show a few weeks back about what happens when things go wrong, and this premise that no investing goes perfectly well 100% of the time. And when things go wrong, what you have to do is take stock, react the best you can, and then use that as a springboard to go forward. Russ likes to give the example of, imagine that surgeon has 99 successful surgeries, and on the 100th surgery, the guy dies on the table. If that surgeon said, well, that's it, forget it, I'm not going to be a surgeon anymore, then what about the next 100 lives he was going to save? Same goes for police or school teachers or anybody who does something where occasionally things can go wrong. Now, you're a landlord that specializes, and you have a huge heart for these types of areas that are underserved, places where they need clean, safe, affordable rentals. And sometimes that comes during a transition time, and there are criminal elements and gangs and those kinds of things. So I think the point is a good one. Don't just raise up your hand and say, well, I'm never going to invest in a place like that. Instead, focus on what you can do. So what were some of the big lessons that you got from this terrible situation, Sep?
Yeah. Well, first is the kids up the street that may or may not have stolen the bike, the gang, right? They live somewhere. And more often than not, we see them living in slumlord houses. So we've purchased plenty of those types of houses where a lot of times, we just purchased a couple of houses recently where it was once one seller who didn't even have leases with any of the tenants. As long as they had a pulse, they would let them live there. And that's very different than professional investors, say like your audience, that are looking for ways to treat this like a business and looking to improve the business and looking to do better, not just how do we take the rent and not make any repairs and just take anyone with a pulse to live in the property. Because if you do that, then the barrier of entry is very low. Then you can get people who then maybe they're currently under eviction moving in there, maybe they're currently in a gang, there's those types of things. So every time, like you guys say, healing the housing crisis one house at a time. I think you guys had said that as early as 2008. When you get a slumlord out of a neighborhood and you put a professional landlord, and you don't have to be like 10,000 doors, but even if you have a good property management company and if you treat this like a business, getting a slumlord out and getting professional investor in is going to do better for the neighborhood. And the second thing is not giving up and getting too emotional about it, like a lot of investors do. The house is not cursed. We're still investing in this area, and if we can find deals in this area, we jump on it. But it's, the prices are a bit higher now than before. The other thing is just having the great team in place and also tying this back into syndication. So the lender on this house currently, it's not a bank, it's a family office. And I met that family office through learning through you and Russ, attending the syndication programs, the syndication mentoring club, and all the years just learning through you guys. So when the shooting happened, I immediately contacted the insurance company to give them notice. You definitely want to do that if you have any type of liability issue that happens at a property, because the insurance company can use that against the landlord if they don't give notice.
Yep.
After I called insurance, I called the family office, and they took it well. Like they're like, okay, well, that's, it's unfortunate what happened. That's very sad, but they didn't say like, oh, we got to pay off the loan tomorrow, right? They're understanding. They knew that this would slow down the refinance. But the other thing, literally as of 2 days before we're doing this interview, the bank that I was trying to work with to pay off the lender pulled out of the deal. They said, hey, we appreciate you letting us know about the homicide that happened, but we think that that's going to affect the marketability of the property. And we're like, the house is already back on the market. Like, we're getting applicants on it. So it's not like there's a dark cloud over it. But, I get it. Their concern is as far as like having it be kind of like radioactive. And that also reminded me of something that happened during COVID in March and April 2020, when the COVID pandemic happened. A lot of the banks and big lenders stopped lending, and we were still doing deals. The lenders who were lending were the private lenders, private investors. The investors who were still investing were those with private capital and the cash to invest. So I think if you're concerned about there being shaky times in the future economically, or if these types of situations happens, it's good not to have all the eggs in one basket, and it's good to have access to private capital, know how to manage it, know how to find it, know how to treat it well, so that we're more resilient to when these types of things can happen.
Not surprised to hear that a family office would be calm, cool, and collected. It's one of our themes this year, is that cooler heads prevail. And to your point, when you have professional management, nobody's happy about a situation like this, but they're able to handle what needs to be done without getting crazy up in their heads, without creating more chaos, dealing with the empathy for the family, and also just making sure that everything that has to be done can be done. That is a huge relief. I think there's one other big point here, Sep. With the fact that you've been on Halloween Horror Stories quite a few times, and you've mentioned you've had 10 shootings over the years. The first time you had a shooting and the first time you were on Halloween Horror Stories, you probably only had a couple dozen houses. And today, because you haven't let that dissuade you, you and your investors have hundreds and hundreds of houses, all of which provide clean, safe, affordable housing in places that need it. We appreciate that about you. And as awful as this story is, thanks for sharing, Sep.
Thank you, Robert and Russ, and thank you so much for the Syndication Mentoring Club. It's been a huge help and continues to help us grow.
There's Sep Bacam from Bacam Investment Group. Well, like a vampire hunter, that puts a stake through the heart of the 2023 edition of Halloween Horror Stories. Immense thanks to all the steadfast investors who had the guts to share their repugnant recitals with us this year. Remember, no matter how things turn out in real estate, you absolutely can learn from other people's experience. So when things don't go as you planned, remember that every setback gives you an opportunity to be a stronger for longer investor. Happy Halloween. Until next week, go out and make some equity happen.